From a cheating scandal to paying tolls on Johnson County's busiest road, it's all the news you can use. Our week's top local stories and newsmakers straight ahead on Week in Review.
Week in Review is made possible through the generous support of Dave and Jamie Cummings, Bob and Marlise Gorley, Smithfield Foods, Haas and Wilkerson Insurance, the Courtney S. Turner Charitable Trust, John H. Mize and Bank of America N.A. co-trustees, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome everyone, my name is Nick Haynes and I am your host and guide through the local most impactful stories of our week. On that journey with us from KCTV 5 News, reporter Caroline Sweeney. From KMBC 9 News, chief political reporter Michael Mahoney. From the Call newspaper, senior writer Eric Wesson. And from the pages of your Kansas City Star, Dave Helling. I should also point out we have a studio audience today. These are our KCPT Producer Society members and we love them because they help us pay the bills and keep this program on the air. Thank you. We're going to begin, though, with the Kansas City, Missouri School District, which is on the hot seat this week for falsifying attendance data, and not just once, but for 3 years in a row. News accounts make it clear it did not happen during the watch of current Superintendent Mark Bedell, but when Dr. Steve Green was in charge and when Interim Superintendent Al Tunis were making the decisions. Dr. Green, who moved to a suburban Atlanta district in 2015, says he had no idea attendance figures were being changed. So I'm fascinated to know, how did the state even discover that the numbers were being changed to begin with?
Well, Nick, it turns out that a former employee of the school district alerted the Missouri State Education Board that there was an issue, and that's when an investigation began.
Now, the Kansas City Star had a headline that said this is going to cost the school district big. How?
Well, because state aid, or at least some aid, is based on per pupil payments, and you are reimbursed for the number of pupils that you submit in a head count, and if you have falsified that information, the state will try and claw some of the money back. We don't know how much, we don't know when, we don't know whether it will be paid out over time or all in a lump sum, but it will have some financial impact.
But Mark Bedell said it wouldn't be much of a big deal for them.
It's a big deal in the sense that it's a terrible black eye. Financially, I don't think it's going to be a big deal. It's probably going to be six figures. I don't think there's going to be a hefty fine or anything like this. This is a $257 million school district, Nick. I think they'll have to repay that back, as Dave indicated, because money from the state's predicated on attendance averages, and it also hurts them on accreditation. They weren't going to be reaccredited this year anyway, but it's a black eye.
Eric. And I agree with Mike. Question though, will the former superintendent, Dr. Green, have to pay the bonus money back that he received? Because for those 3 years, he probably made at least $15,000 in bonuses because it was in his contract. Dr. Bedell doesn't have those bonuses in there for attendance.
But he said he knew nothing about it. What was the motivation of the 7 employees, though, who have been implicated in this? 3 of them no longer work for the school district. 4 of them are on paid administrative leave. Were they making these changes against their will? Were they being paid themselves to do this? Or were they just motivated by trying to do the best thing they could for students in that district?
I don't think we have the answer to any of those questions, Nick. And so that will entail some further reporting and further investigation. You can see, though, why this might have happened because of all the figures contained in education reports. Falsifying attendance would be the easiest thing to do, particularly in an urban school district like Kansas City's, where so many people move, so many students go to different schools. You know, a little nip or a tuck here where, you know, you could easily submit figures that were exaggerated or inflated.
And the current superintendent, Mark Bedell, says there are no bonuses today, though,
right,
that would tie attendance scores and the amount of money you might receive.
Right. He said that, and former board president Melissa Robinson, I talked to her, she was out of town, but she said they took that aspect out. But I kind of find it hard to believe that Dr. Green was kind of hands-on, that he didn't know anything about it. I just kind of find that hard to believe.
You know, I don't know if there were payoffs, but number one, getting points for attendance is sort of like gym. You'll almost never flunk that, okay? But Kansas City repeatedly flunks it because of what we were just discussing about mobility of the families. And I think that probably the base motivation here was probably to get the numbers up over at least 80%, and they struggled to even do that.
Mm-hmm. If you head across Kansas on I-70 or head down to Wichita on I-35, you will have no choice but to pay a toll. It's how the state has helped pay for building and maintaining its biggest roads. Is Johnson County about to get its first toll road? Overland Park leaders say they're looking at that option as they try to expand what is now the busiest road in the entire state of Kansas. It's 69 highway, 80,000 cars already drive on that stretch of roadway every day, and it's about to get even more congested. They want to expand the highway from 4 lanes to 6, but grants to help make that happen from the federal government and the state have been rejected. Now, the word toll certainly captures public attention, but is this just one option being considered?
No, I think it's the primary option. I wouldn't be surprised at all if this happens, especially in light of the fact that tolling on Kansas Road is already part of the transportation plan with the turnpike.
Yeah, but one of the things that has changed is people have this image of toll roads having booths and you throw a quarter and go.
Yeah.
That's not really how it works anymore. You buy a transponder or some device, you put it on your in your car, and then you automatically pay toll when you go through. The other thing to keep in mind, Nick, is this is going to be increasingly an issue across our region because revenue from gas taxes are not keeping up with the needs for roads, in part because cars get better mileage now, and in part because people are using electric cars and maybe not driving as much, and so these kinds of solutions will come up. They will be highly controversial.
And it's come up many times in Missouri, and voters have been asked to look at this issue, and nobody wants it in Missouri.
Right, and I think that's why you have. I think the last time it went down in flames as well. With gas taxes and those kind of things to help pay for the roads just isn't a good thing. And I think in Kansas, if they voted on it, it probably would go down in flames as well.
But they don't have initiative petition in Kansas.
Exactly.
So they could do this without having to actually ever go to voters to do this toll.
Correct. Of course, at some point, elected official will have to answer to this decision if it's implemented, and so it has to be well documented and well presented.
And it could still be a public road, and you can just have express lanes where you pay to go through so you can get there faster than your fellow motorists, Caroline.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you're seeing the sprawl continue south on 69, getting people into the downtown area is going to be a continuing discussion. But something that I find interesting is that, the population density is mostly in the eastern part of the state. And I think people are going to start raising the question of why do we keep charging us to be on these roads when we're not seeing that distribution go past places, like Salina and Wichita?
The Eastern Kansas representatives will say, you know what, we'll trade you that road discussion for the school discussion.
Yep, they will.
Citing rising homicides and the need for more investigators, our largest police department is now disbanding its mounted unit. The Kansas City Police Board says this is not an anti-horse decision, but an anti-homicide decision. How does this move, though, help reduce Kansas City's murder rate, Eric?
It's going to put more officers on the street, but 8 more officers maybe. They're going to shift some detectives around to make people more active on some of the homicide cases. Other than that, I think it's basically symbolic and it goes along. They're still going to be short. If they put 8 people on the department, you're going to have 16 people retire, so you still have the gap in the population of police officers that you have. So it looks good. It's a nice symbolic move. Makes it seem like. My question is, what was the magic number for them to come up with that theory? 130 homicides. They didn't think about this at 115, or number one.
The department's own study 2 years ago said this is one way you can save money and reallocate resources to more important crime-fighting endeavors. And the police department resisted it because it was so visible and because there was a very intensive lobbying effort from horse lovers to keep this unit going forward. But Nick, there is a discussion, low-level discussion, that's gaining momentum to add even more officers to the police department in next year's city budget, 25, 30 officers. I think Mayor Quinton Lucas has talked about that. It was going to be very difficult politically to sell that when you were still spending $600,000 plus on a horse-mounted patrol unit. And so I think the chief understands that. Get that off the table and then add these officers down the road.
But public relations-wise, when they send the horses out to the schools, kids loved them. And I think it was a good relationship.
Well, there are others
PR
also, even
that.
people who are not horse lovers, who believe that having those officers in communities on horseback, they might have gotten information that they wouldn't get if the police officer was in his vehicle.
Yes, animals
or her vehicle.
automatically make people more approachable. You know, whether you, well, Michael might disagree with me, but I think I've seen people interact with these mounted patrol officers in all kinds of different situations. You know, is it better to have them maybe walking around on the streets, person to person? Maybe. Horses are expensive. The unit was expensive, but a lot of that stuff was being donated to the mounted unit, including the horses themselves. If this is a money issue, I think this may have been the only option at the moment, but we'll have to see what happens when it comes to next year's budget.
Caroline, I don't think anybody went, "Ooh, there's a horsey and a cop. Let me tell them about the crime wave on our
That's not
block."
what I'm saying.
No, but my further point here is this was a small unit. It wasn't particularly effective at crowd control. It was cosmetic, and it's probably a better use of the money somewhere else.
Some of you may know, others may not, that Kansas City, Missouri is the only major city in America that does not control its own police department. The KCPD has been under state control for the past 80 years. Our largest local police force is controlled by a state board of commissioners appointed by the governor. They hire the police chief and they oversee the department. That odd setup came about during a time of rampant corruption in Kansas City, and it was thought in 1939 that having the state run things would stop our police from doing the bidding of local politicians more interested in lining their own pockets than protecting the public. Now the Kansas City Council, considering a resolution to make the city's own decisions about its own local cops. It was introduced by new councilwoman Melissa Robinson. What does she think will happen if Kansas City gets to control its police department again, Eric?
Accountability. Accountability to the community. That would be one thing, and that would be the major thing. A lot of things, and especially with these police-involved shootings, Kansas City's never prosecuted a police officer for killing. Assaults, yes, but for murder, they haven't. And the law of averages says that one of those shootings is going to be bad. The crime also, there's no accountability. They just answer to the Board of Police Commissioners. Even though they're local, that's not the same as Caroline calling them saying, hey, I need this in my neighborhood.
And bring the horse.
St. Louis, though, St. Louis did this 6 years ago. They were also under state control, the second city in America. They then were brought back under local control 6 years ago. What happened there? Did crime go down? What changes took place?
It did not, and it's a more complicated formula, Nick, than get rid of the board, lower murder rates. Obviously, many things are involved. By the way, took a state vote to give St. Louis that ability. It might take some state legislation here, the resolution, a little less important. But let me explain why this is important. I wrote an editorial today that will be in the weekend papers about a move to end the residency requirement for Kansas City police officers, which is controversial. Right now, they have to live in Kansas City. A lot of officers want to live outside the city. I wrote an email to Nathan Garrett, who's the chair of the police board, and said, well, can you give me your views on residency? And he wrote back and said, I don't want to comment. I have mixed feelings on this. He's the head of the police board. I mean, you've got to pick a side, and to suggest that governance of the department is left to that kind of one side this, on the other side that, it's just not a good approach. That's why local officials might want to have control.
You know, the other thing, real good points. The other thing to consider here is a guy by the name of Mike Parson, who happens to be the governor right now. He's got the authority. I am unsure that he would be unwilling to unleash or release that authority in any way without having to go through the legislature and perhaps a vote.
Right.
And the other thing is, it hasn't worked out that well in St. Louis, but there are, as Dave says, lots of reasons for that.
And if it's going to have to go through the legislature, this is going to take a lot of time for Mayor Quentin Lucas and some of his legislative lobby to focus on making this transition. And I want to know if that's really something he wants to focus on during this first part of his first term. He had a lot of stuff going on while he was running. He's crammed a lot into his first 100 days. I don't know if this is something he's going to want to pull his sole focus onto.
That is a great point. And Lucas is also trying to play ball with the governor on some other anti-crime issues. I don't know if he wants to spend the jet.
This week, Overland Park becomes the latest city in the metro to equip all of its police officers with body cameras. It's a move department officials say will help improve transparency. But some are not totally convinced. They say to be truly effective in building community trust, the city must also set a policy that allows the public to see the footage captured by the cameras. What is the concern there?
Transparency. If they're going to have this system, and they ought to have it, there should be some process to let the public see this in a timely fashion.
It's interesting because we've been hearing for years about Kansas City, Missouri also doing this, and they still haven't to this date. So what is the roadblock there, Eric?
They say it's funding, having a process in which, let's say somebody's next door neighbor wants to see the footage or wants to see it, keeping the stuff stored, the information stored, is supposed to be cost a lot of money.
Is though the fact that we've had a
supposedly.
skyrocketing homicide, a number of homicides in Missouri, also taking away from the prioritization of this issue at this point?
I think the homicide rate in Kansas City is going to draw a lot of focus away from several different things within the police department and within the way the city works. I think that's just something we're all going to have to get used to. One thing that I find fascinating about the discussion around body cameras, especially with Kansas police departments, is the Kansas Open Records Act has very strange guidelines for how long you can hold on to this footage and the discretion behind releasing some of this footage. And we all know that when we see body camera video, dash camera video, cell camera or cell phone video from incidents that are highly publicized, everyone's going to see something different.
This weekend, Kansas City plays host to the Cannabis Industry Showcase as Missouri prepares to open medical marijuana dispensaries. Experts hope to educate the public about what's involved. But has the state's implementation plans for medical marijuana hit a setback this week as a TV station uncovers Missouri doctors qualifying patients without ever meeting them or even showing any proof of their ailments?
For $199.99, he schedules an online appointment to get people signed up for a medical marijuana card.
My name's Dr. Zara, and I can certify you for medical marijuana. Do you know what your qualifying condition is?
Our producer said knee pain from childhood.
Well, chronic pain is one of the qualifying conditions. That should be no problem.
Without reviewing any medical records from our producer's doctors, she got the green light.
How do you know the person actually has the condition they're describing when you're not able to actually see them in person and do a self-exam?
I just assume people are providing accurate information.
Is there any concern that they may not be?
The doctor thought about it for nearly a minute, but didn't have much of an answer.
I have to think about that.
That's from KMOV in St. Louis. The first licenses for medical dispensaries are supposed to be granted next month, with patients getting legal pot for the first time in June. Does stories like this, though, fuel the critics who say Missouri needs to slow down on that timeline until we have a better understanding how this is going to work?
Well, of course, stories like that are going to fuel critics' criticism. Now, I've done a lot of stories around medical marijuana here in the Kansas City Metro. I've never seen anything like that. That's our sister station, as a matter of fact, in St. Louis. I sat down for about 3 hours in one licensing area. Everyone had stacks and stacks of paperwork. I walked with one patient through the process. I think those are going to be examples that are obviously going to make a firestorm.
So we just pick the one bad apple, do we?
No, I don't think that. I
Okay.
don't think that. We have seen other instances where there have just been en masse kind of allowances, but I think that's going to be something that you're going to have to pick and choose.
But we're still on board then to have the first patients get their legally approved medical pot starting in June?
Yeah, the dispensaries will probably open up. At first, they were talking about April, and it slid a bit, depending on the processing of these licenses and things like that. But by the summer, there'll be medical marijuana available in dispensaries all over Kansas City, by the way. Certainly by 4th of July, maybe a few weeks earlier.
There are going to be others like that. I don't think that's an isolated situation.
Yeah, but just
and as it becomes
Yeah,
more active, there are going to be a lot of them. You probably won't even have to video it. You probably just write them a letter and they send you a permit.
But just so we're clear, that's not isolated to marijuana either. There are
Right.
doctors who will prescribe pills. You can get them online or by mail. This is a problem that extends beyond the use of pot in Missouri.
And very quickly, I don't think that Missouri is really that far away from legalization. It's just a hunch.
It had been rumored already. Now the race is on to hire Troy Schulte as the new Jackson County administrator. Schulte, who recently announced his retirement as city manager in Kansas City, has been offered the $220,000 a year job by the county's executive, Frank White. But just as it all seemed like a done deal, Jackson County legislators say not so fast. They want to know what he's going to do to earn that big salary. The vote to hire Schulte has been postponed. Is this just a dot the I's and cross the T's kind of delay, or a sign that the hiring is now in trouble, Michael?
It's larger than that. The hiring of Schulte is not in trouble. The county legislature wants to hire him. What the problem is here is exactly what the problem is with Jackson County. This is lousy legal work, that they didn't have this contract ready to provide basics about job description, how it fits into the organization, exactly what he would be doing. And Ron Finley came out and said it very succinctly at the meeting last Monday. This is not ready. It should have been ready. It's just another example of it. Look for it to happen, however, on Monday.
And I think those are part of the reason. I mean, obviously, that is the reason why things have slowed down. But this is an opportunity for the Jackson County legislature to start restoring its some trust in the people who live inside the county, because we've seen the issues with the way it operates and the way the legislature and Frank White handle each other. So I think this was the opportunity to say, hey, actually, we're trying to right the ship. Look at all of this. We're ready to go out of the gate, and they couldn't do it.
I was surprised to see that this was actually a new position of administrator. It seemed to me that there would be in all counties a point person who's responsible for overseeing all of the nitty-gritty details
and
of
Jackson
county government.
Sort of has that. It has a couple of resignations that frees up the money for this. They're not really adding a lot of salary. Two things, by the way, Nick, on this story to keep in mind. First, Troy Schulte doesn't live in Jackson County. And that's going to be, well, it may be, we'll see.
Is there a residency requirement?
There is not, and he said he'd be willing to move in there, but maybe with the lawmakers it's not an issue, but with the voting public it may be. And Kansas City is getting its ducks in a row. We still don't know when Troy Schulte will leave, but I've already been told they've picked an acting city manager. They think they have a sense of that, so that will go forward.
Last week we mentioned that Mayor Lucas was now seeking your help to find ways of honoring Dr. Martin Luther King now that voters chose to take down his name from the Paseo. While those responses are supposed to go to the park board, many of our viewers couldn't contain themselves and flooded our email. As we're all about viewer engagement on this program, I wanted it to at least bring up several interesting ideas to get our panel's feedback. Sean writes, why not name a bridge after Dr. King? We can call it the Dr. Martin Luther King Togetherness Bridge. What do you think, Eric?
That probably wouldn't work. We've already got the Buck O'Neill Bridge, and people aren't warm and fuzzy about it because they say it's deteriorated. So,
well, I called Sean, and he told me, I asked him if he had a bridge in mind. He said the Christopher Bond Bridge. I'm assuming Senator Bond wouldn't be too keen on that.
I don't know. I mean, a bridge is a bridge, right? And so I actually wonder what Kit Bond would have to say about that. But I think, and we have to try and figure out how to get this moving. So if it's going to be a bridge or a street or some part of the infrastructure, which personally I don't think is the best way to handle trying to name something after Dr. Martin Luther King, we've got to get it moving forward.
Well, Terry is convinced a fantastic way to honor Dr. King would be to have Kansas City, Missouri and Kansas City, Kansas jauntily rename State Line Road. We're not talking about the entire street, just State Line where it connects with KCK. Would Mayor Alvey go for that, Mike?
Hard to say. I'm interested in, number one, what the reaction Clay County would be to changing the Bond Bridge. Yeah. And number two, I've been a big fan of 63rd Street. Change that. That is a street that spans Kansas City.
And I think they would get some pushback from the black clergy because they don't feel that would connect to the black community because a lot of people don't drive out State Line.
You know, our viewers have plenty of ideas, not just about finding ways to honor Dr. King. They are hardly shrinking violets about giving their opinion on any issue. Skip writes, I can't believe you're not talking about what's happening in Clay County. Is the county releasing half the inmates from the county jail because commissioners won't give the sheriff the money to feed them?
It's a mess in Clay County. It just is on several different levels. Matt Fleener's been doing some outstanding reporting on this at several different levels, and there is a citizens petition drive to have the state auditor review Clay County government. That's underway. That's all jacked up. It's a bag of worms.
And when we do a program like this every week, it's hard to get to every single story, big story making the headlines. What was the big story that we missed?
That's a long way to watch a game. Hundreds of Kansas Cityans head to Mexico City to see the Chiefs beat the Chargers. It's official, Major League Baseball owners greenlighting the sale of the Kansas City Royals to an ownership group led by entrepreneur John Sherman.
I'm deeply appreciative of the Commissioner's office and my fellow owners for their confidence and trust in the vote today. It's a responsibility that I'll take very seriously.
Citing 3 unnamed Republicans, Time magazine claims Mike Pompeo is now ready to pull the trigger and declare his Senate candidacy in Kansas.
To be able to lead the organization has just been one of my dreams.
The interim tag is dropped. Donna Mays officially named the first female fire chief in Kansas City, Missouri history. And want to open a restaurant? Is it just me, or is there a staggering number of local eateries now shuttering their doors, being evicted, or declaring bankruptcy?
Did you pick one of those at home or something else? What about our panel, Caroline Sweeney?
Yeah, my story this week is always going to be Pompeo. We actually heard the president this morning kind of give a nudge for Pompeo's run for Senate, so we'll have to see what happens now.
Michael Mahoney.
Same. Pompeo, and for the same reasons that Caroline just mentioned.
I didn't put it in my main part of the program because some people get viewers who get fed up of us talking about something that never seems to happen.
Yeah, but you threw Caroline and I a bone. We're grateful.
Okay,
yes,
thank you. Dave Helling.
Katie Moore and I at the Star spent 6 months on an important story, the disaster of the public defender system in Missouri. It's underfunded, the lawyers are overworked, underqualified, the turnover is horrendous, and poor people get screwed by the system every single day. We invite your viewers to read that work in the Kansas City Star.
Thank you. Eric Wesson.
Nothing controversial, just the fact that next Thursday is Thanksgiving. And we should have a lot to be thankful for.
Actually, we had 30 emails from this week, people decrying Thanksgiving. It's a very explosive issue, actually.
Oh, my goodness.
A major town hall coming up on that topic. That is our Week in Review. Our thanks to our news reviewers from KCTV5, Caroline Sweeney, and Eric Wesson from The Call. From KMBC 9 News, Michael Mahoney and Dave Helling of your Kansas City Star. And I'm Nick Haynes. No show next week. It is a Thanksgiving holiday weekend, and I'm thankful to you for watching. From all of us here at KCPT, thanks for spending part of your weekend with us.